ahead in your will. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Elijah is quite a character. How could someone, I don't know when Elijah became a God-fearing man, but anyway, at some point, maybe it was before he was a God-fearing man, I don't know, somebody will tell me afterwards, but he married this woman called Jezebel. It's not even a nice name, is it? Never mind her being a nice person. And she was the daughter of a priest, King Ethbaal. She was from the group of people that worshipped Baal, an ungodly woman. This Ethbaal king was the ruler of the cities of Tyre and Sidon. And when Jezebel married King Ahab, she persuaded Ahab to introduce the worship of the Tyrian god Baal Melkart. I'd never heard of him before till I did a bit of research. A nature god. In other words, they're worshipping nature. Most of the prophets of God, or Yahweh, were actually killed at her command. So she spent her life killing God's prophets, even though she was married to one of them. So what kind of happy marriage could that have been? So in this chapter, it starts off with Ahab telling Jezebel what Elijah had done in killing the false prophets of Baal. If you go back a bit, you'll read all about that. Elijah had killed or ordered the killing of all the prophets of Baal. And this incensed Jezebel, as you can imagine, as she was the one that was their hero. And she told Elijah via a messenger that he would be dead within 24 hours. Can you believe that? This was just after God had vindicated Elijah when he sacrificed to God. You remember that the altars, and Baal couldn't get their altar to light, and then Elijah had an altar and it was also covered in water, and it lit. And as a consequence of that, Elijah was vindicated before his people. And Elijah had mocked Baal. Do you remember the little story where it says in front of his supporters, he said, perhaps he's sleeping. Perhaps he's on holiday. But anyway, it made no difference. Baal's sacrifice just didn't light. But Elijah's sacrifice did light. And of course, this was marking the end of the 3 years of drought. So the Israelites should have been actually very pleased with Elijah because he'd brought an end to the drought, and God had vindicated who he was in front of them. But Ahab and Jezebel were two of Israel's most evil rulers. And so when Elijah heard of Jezebel's plan, you're not going to be here this time tomorrow, mate, what did he do? He ran for his life as far as Beersheba. I wonder what you would do, what I would do, if somebody told you, if you're one of these people that go to Regis chapel, you'll be dead by this time tomorrow. What would you do? Would you trust God to protect you? Or would you phone up your mother-in-law and say, I'm coming to visit you for a while? But Elijah, having mocked Baal, then decided with this threat to run for his life. I'm not staying here, he said. This man who had seen God do the greatest things. This man whom God had told there's not going to be a single raindrop except when you say so. And he had done all these things with the strength of God. So he ran for his life as far as Beersheba, which was in Judah, and so a bit safer than where he was. But I wonder how he felt at this time. After all that he had seen God do through him, he's now running away. Well, it's one thing to run away from God if you don't actually really know God very well. But when you know God and when you're worshipping him and when you trust him, why would you run away? But anyway, he ran to Beersheba, which is in Judah, a more godly place, and I'm sure he felt a bit safer where he got there. But I don't know how he really felt. Because he wasn't just running away from Jezebel. He was also running away from his own people. and he was also running away from God. There's a little anecdote, I'll not mention the names of the people concerned, but I can think of not one or two people I can think of who were so-called godly men who fell into sin in some way and just disappeared. They weren't just running away from God. They were actually running away from the people that thought that they were godly people, and that's very damaging to them. But anyway, Elijah went to Beersheba, and having got there, he decided he was going to go on a day's journey into the wilderness. He had a servant with him. We're not told his name, but he left his servant at Regis, Beersheba. But maybe they're related. Maybe that's your twin town. But he went to Beersheba, and he went off on a day's journey into the wilderness, and he sat down under this broom tree or juniper tree, depends on your translation. And when he got there, what he basically did was send up a prayer requesting assisted suicide. That's really what he did when he got there. It says in verse 4, he came to the broom tree, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under the tree and fell asleep. Maybe to a lesser degree, but have you ever felt that you have had enough? This is too much. I can't cope anymore. Take my life, or get me out of here somehow. But it just begs the question again, how could a man who had been so great and bold in God's service suddenly become completely cowardly, a cowardly wreck because of one woman? And that's all it was. It was one woman that brought him down. Now, I'm not saying a man couldn't do that, ladies. Don't worry. I'm sure there's many men who've wandered off into sin and destroyed women. That's perfectly the case. But in this case, it was the woman who caused the problem. But that's what happened. I don't know how old he was at that point, but that's irrelevant. But sometimes when we are a bit older, we can feel we're past our sell-by date a bit, and there's not really anything that we can really do. Or we could just be a bit weary for some reason. Life's not been very kind to us in some ways, although God's never left us. We might think we're past our sell-by date. Our faith might be a little bit of a low ebb, which could well be our own fault. Or we just want to give up. There's a verse in Jeremiah 9, which Pat might find for us and put up on the screen now, and I presume it's Jeremiah is writing this. And he says this, and these words are sort of reflection of Elijah's thoughts, I think. Oh, that I had in the desert a lodging place for travelers, so that I might leave my people and go away from them, for they are all adulterers, a crowd of unfaithful people. That were the thoughts of Jeremiah, but they could equally have applied. In fact, I'm sure it described how Elijah felt with particular reference to his wife. Now, he wasn't saying that he's had enough in the same way as Paul was saying it when he talked about his departure. When Paul was coming to the end of his life, he says, I have fought the fight, I have finished the course. That was Paul. He was looking forward to being with Jesus, which is far better. It wasn't that this earth was rubbish. The contrary, it's just that heaven with Jesus is better. But what can we learn, or what can we take from Elijah here? Quite simply, if this can happen to Elijah, it can happen to us. There's a verse in James, I've not got it written down here, but it simply says, Elijah was a man with a nature just like us. So he was just like us. He wasn't a superhuman creature. He was a man just like us. And James 5:17 says he prayed fervently that it might not rain, and for 3 years and 6 months it did not rain on the earth. But Elijah's words that he'd had enough are the words of someone who is depressed, someone who is not thinking clearly, and it may be that you can identify that in some way. So having left his servant at Beersheba, he decided to go off alone into the wilderness. You know, that's not necessarily a bad thing, to go off into the wilderness. Jesus did that. It was a common thing to do, a relatively common thing for people to go off into the wilderness just to get away from it and to meditate and to contemplate and perhaps be in touch with God a bit more. You remember Abraham left his servant at the foot of the mountain when he went up to worship. Jesus himself went to the Garden of Gethsemane without his disciples. It seems they are providing some sort of example for us to follow so that we can maybe make a decision sometime to be alone with God and free from disturbance. But we don't actually have to go off into the desert. Jesus says to us about prayer, go to your room and close the door. The next verse that's coming up is from Psalm 91, verse 1, and it's a similar example. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I would like to check the translation of that word shelter. In the King James, I don't know what it says in my version, but the King James, it talks about the secret place. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High. And how often and how much time do we spend in the secret place with God? He that dwells in the secret place shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Think of the secret places that we enjoyed when we were younger. Imagine being a child and either in the house or outside, if it was suitable, with your friends, you could find a secret place and you can go and hide. And what was the point of going and hiding? The point of going and hiding was that no one could find you. No one could find you. You disappeared, and you might even cause panic. But that's the thought here, that you go out of contact, incommunicado with everything else around you, so that you can be in closer touch with God. In fact, this being apart could sometimes be so good that you didn't want to come out. And if we're really in touch with God and we're really enjoying prayer, then we can be in a situation sometimes where we don't want to come back from the secret place. We have to because we're in this world, but we don't have to. But you won't experience that unless you take time to take yourself away from the busyness around you. So that's the picture of the psalmist in Psalm 91. God has a secret hiding place, as it were, and he invites every one of us to enjoy him there. He doesn't invite us to visit him there. Did you notice that? He invites us to dwell there, to live there. To dwell means to live. It becomes our address. Sometimes we have to pack up and move to his secret place. And to do this, we have to, no exceptions, somehow find a way to walk away from all the clamour and the enticements of the world. We must be willing to quieten our hearts. We must be willing to quieten our hearts before him and allow him to investigate those inner recesses, as it were, that actually we never reveal to anyone else because we'd probably be too embarrassed. Secret places are places of honesty and trust. We think about that. The things that we do in secret places are things that require complete honesty and complete trust. And so it's the same with secret places with God. We need to be willing to be transparent and honest with him. So that's one idea of a secret place. Jesus sort of amplifies that a little bit in Matthew chapter 6, verse 6, which is the next one. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. That's an under-considered verse, isn't it? To think that God sees us when we've taken time out to go and spend with him privately, in secret, and he will reward us. What the reward is, I don't know. It might just be answered prayer, I don't know. But there's some sort of reward attached to seeking privacy with God. I don't think Jesus was necessarily indicating a physical location, because we can pray anywhere at any time. But we must enter the secret place in our own, so that our own spirits can connect with God's Spirit. Quiet locations help. We should seek solitude when we want to spend uninterrupted time with God. That doesn't mean we shouldn't pray with our husband or our wife or any other family member or friend. Of course we can. But it's good to have time to have privacy with God. And it seems from what Jesus said that we could have a designated place. Here's a place that I go to contemplate what's happening in my life and to share it with God. When I take the dog a walk in the morning up the forest, that's a time for me to contemplate and speak to God out loud about anything if I want to. But it needs commitment to do that. Although Jesus often prayed in public, we know that, he also slipped away from the crowds and even his own friends to spend more time alone with his Father in solitude. Will God be there? Will God be there if I'm in a situation of real difficulty and I'm in a bad mood and perhaps I've done something wrong? Perhaps I feel guilty about something. Perhaps I feel I've neglected God or my family or someone else. Is God going to listen to me? Do you remember the story of Hagar in the Old Testament? Genesis 16:13 is our next verse that we'll have up there. She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me. This is Hagar. For she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. Hagar was aware that even though she had come away and was abandoned, that God still saw the situation she was in and still cared for her immensely. Thou, God, seest me. When I learned that verse as a child from the good old King James, the verse is, Thou, God, seest me. My parents used that as a big stick. You behave yourself when you're out, because remember Genesis 16:13, God sees you. But that's not the thought here. The thought here is that God sees us when we need his help. So in Elijah's case here, depressed in the desert and alone, but only he wasn't alone. He wasn't alone. I think he thought he was, but he wasn't. He's fallen down under this tree, fallen asleep. And then what happens? He fell asleep, and at that point, an angel touched him. An angel touched him. He's alone in the desert. He's in the middle of nowhere. If that was you, having a night in the open air in a tent somewhere, and suddenly someone touched you, what would you do? You'd be shocked. You'd jump up. What was that? What was that? I'm sure that's what Elijah did. The angel said, get up and eat. Now, if you've ever been depressed, one of the consequences of depression is that actually you don't actually feel very much like eating. You just don't. And so Elijah's given this command from the angel, get up and eat. Well, good for Elijah. He obeyed that command. But what did he do then? He just lay down to sleep again. Not sure that's what he should have done. And then the same thing happened again, only the angel said a little bit more this time. He said, get up and eat, but also he added, the journey is too great for you. You cannot do this on your own as you are Elijah. You need to tap into some other resource. And that's the same with us sometimes. If we get a little bit down, a little bit stale, a little bit sleepy, even a little bit depressed, we need an angel or God's word or someone to touch us and say, get up, have something to eat and drink. And you say, no, I don't feel like doing that. But the angel says, the journey is too great for you. That implies something interesting, that the journey is not over. We can get to a point sometimes where we think, for me, the journey is coming to an end. I've done this and I've done this and done that over so many years, and I've done my bit, and really I've had enough now, Lord. And we sit down. Unbiblical. Unbiblical. God's saying to Elijah here, or the angel saying to Elijah in behalf of God, the journey, that's the journey ahead, not the journey past, the journey ahead is too great for you. So, have something to eat and drink. Not sure that I've been touched like an angel as Elijah was, but maybe at another time and in another way as I am still worshipping and serving God, even though I've been through various difficult times. He ate a cake of bread, but for us, even if we don't feel like eating because of lack of appetite, we still need to eat. Perhaps not a cake of bread, but perhaps of the bread of life. Remember that chorus about I'm feeding on the living bread? I'm drinking at the fountainhead? That's what we need to do. This book is the food that we need to get us back moving if we've come to a halt for whatever reason. And the reason might not be our fault whatsoever. In Elijah's case, it was this stupid woman that he married. But here he has this message to get up and eat. Jesus is the living bread. If we feed on him and on his word, there is no doubt we will be strengthened for the journey. But you know, feeding on this word is not just opening the Bible and reading half a dozen verses. It's looking at a psalm or looking somewhere after consideration and then meditating on it and asking God, what are you saying to me through this bread? Because effectively, that's what it does. Elijah was only human. The journey was too much for him. My favourite resource when it comes to commentaries is Matthew Henry. And Matthew Henry wrote his commentary way back in 1708. I've got a 9-volume set that I got from a church that closed down about 50 years ago. Matthew Henry only wrote the commentary up as far as Acts, and then he died, but some of his friends completed it for him using some of the material that he had provided in sermon notes. But Matthew Henry has a very interesting comment about this verse, saying the journey is too much for us. I'll read it through twice because I think it's a marvellous description of what the situation is. God knows what he designs for us, even if we don't. What service, what trials, and God will take care of us when we, for lack of foresight, cannot for ourselves, will be furnished for them with grace sufficient. He that appoints what the voyage shall be will victual the ship accordingly. I like that statement. It's always getting back to a time when there were lots of more naval connotations. He that appoints, plans the voyage for us, will victual the ship accordingly. If you want another verse that says the same thing, it would be 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. My grace is sufficient for you. That verse was written by Paul, but Paul says he heard it from Jesus directly. My grace is sufficient from you. Do not limit what you might hear from God. God can communicate. In many ways, it's not clear how he communicates, but he still communicates. But that's not the end of the story. He continued in the wilderness for 40 days until he reached a place called Horeb, on the border with Egypt, and the place that he was up that was known as the mountain of God. Generally believed to be Sinai, and Horeb was generally believed to be the same place, not the Mount of Transfiguration, that was somewhere else, but the mountain of God, Sinai and Horeb, the same place. And when Elijah gets to Horeb, he found a cave and spent the night there. And when he gets there, God asks him this amazing question. What are you doing here, Elijah? He says that to me frequently. He's saying it to you now, whether you want to listen or not. What are you doing here, Elijah? It's directed to the reader, to the listener rather, to you. It's talking about the present. It's talking about action. It's personal. On the Bible Gateway website, some of you will know the Bible Gateway website where you can look all sorts of things up. And there are 50 different translations of the Bible on Bible Gateway. And if you look that verse up, you'll find that these words are exactly the same in all 50 translations. Exactly the same. Apart from the Voice, which adds one little comment, and that's a paraphrase. The Voice translation adds, if I can find it, adds, what do you desire? So it adds on the question, not what are you doing here, but what do you want to do? But that's not in the original. What are you doing here? And put your name in there. If we get back towards Psalm 37, verse 23, as God could be saying the same thing to us, the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. But of course, at this point, Elijah had gone his own way. He had run away from God. Oh, you say I haven't run away from God. Well, perhaps not, but maybe you're not exactly where God wants you to be. In that sense, to some extent, you're not doing what God planned for you to do. Elijah had gone his own way. That is the reason for God's question, and God was pulling him up by saying to him, what are you doing here? Maybe you're in the right place, but you're doing the wrong thing. What are you doing here? And I could be in the right place, but doing the wrong thing. And what are you doing here? You might be in the wrong place to be doing the right thing. It's all sort of individual, and you can break it down and ask God what it is that he wants you to be doing and where. If Elijah had answered that question honestly, this is not in the passage, I think he would say, I don't know. I don't know. But he had come to Mount Horeb, and this was a mountain where God had previously manifested his glory when the 10 Commandments were given to Moses. And it may even have been the same cave that Moses hid in when the Lord passed before him and proclaimed his name. And we've got a little section from Exodus chapter 33 that we can just read together if we can. Hopefully. The Lord replied, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. Then Moses said to him, if your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here. How will anyone know that you are pleased with me and with your people unless you go with us? What else will distinguish me and your people from all the other people on the face of the earth? And the Lord said to Moses, I will do the very thing you have asked, because I am pleased with you and I know you by name. Then Moses said, now show me your glory. And the Lord said, I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. But he said, you cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live. Then the Lord said, there is a place near me where you may stand on a rock. When you see my glory, when my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft in the rock and cover you with my hand until I have passed by. But then I will remove my hand, and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen. Is it possible that God could in some way pass by us today? You're not going to see his face, but at the end of the day or tomorrow you might look back and say, yeah, God showed me something of his glory, and I need to be in a place where I can follow him. What are you doing here, Elijah? The first time the question was asked, Elijah did not really answer. He's a bit of a moan about how he perceived he'd been treated by the Israelites, if not by God himself. But the second time, Elijah listens more closely and realizes God has more for him to do. Then God says, go and stand on the mountain before the Lord. Go outside, be a city set on a hill. Stop hiding in your cave, whether that cave is your kitchen or your bedroom or even the pub. Stop hiding. Come out and stand in my presence and see what happens. What did happen? What was it? There was wind, an earthquake and fire, but he didn't hear God speak through these things. And we get plenty of these things even happening now. But then a different kind of drama. Silence. Silence. The silence after the wind, the silence after the earthquake and the fire was tangible. But in this stillness, when alone with God, he heard the same voice asking the same questions. What are you doing here? Elijah seemed to have reached the end of his rope. He thought he was the only one left. He thought there was no hope. But we find out right at the end of the reading there was how many thousand left? I've forgotten how many it was. 5,000, I think, something like that. Still left as God's people. We're not the only one. We're not without support. 7,000 others it was, still faithful to heaven. He wasn't the only one. Sometimes we feel we're so alone with God. I've got a final reading just to finish with from the book of Hebrews, and then we'll have our closing song. You have come not to a mountain. Remember that Elijah was at the mountain of God. You have come to a mountain. You have not come to a mountain that can be touched, and that is burning with fire, to darkness, gloom, and storm. To a trumpet blast, or to such a voice speaking words that those who heard it begged that no further word be spoken to them, because they could not bear what was commanded. If even an animal touches a mountain, it must be stoned. The sight was so terrifying that Moses said, I am trembling with fear. But then we get the difference. But you, and we can include us in that, have come to Mount Zion, to the heavenly Jerusalem, the city of the living God. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly. To the church of the firstborn, whose names are written in heaven. You have come to God, the judge of all men, to the spirits of righteous men made perfect. Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. So see to it that you do not refuse him who speaks. If they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, how much less will we if we turn away from him who warns us from heaven. Is that the last? At that time, his voice shook the earth. But now he has promised, once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. The words once more indicate the removing of what can be shaken, that is, created things, so that what cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably with reverence and fear. For our God is a consuming fire. I've forgotten how far I went on with that, but these are tremendously powerful words. But we haven't come to God because he's going to terrorize us. We're invited to the mountain of God, the heavenly Jerusalem. You have come to Mount Zion, the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly. May God bless his word to us. If you want to talk to me about anything there, because I've gone a bit fast, please do. But or any comment, you might disagree with me. I hope